Good day, Internet. Chavez and Valko here with another immigration update. Actually, this is an update to an update regarding the new vaccine mandates. On October 25th, 2021, President Biden issued Presidential Proclamation 10294, which took effect on November 8th, 2021. The proclamation lifted the geographic COVID 19 bans that restricted travel from China, Iran, Europe, Brazil, South Africa, and India. In place of the bans, the proclamation suspended the entry into the U.S. via air travel of non immigrants who are not fully vaccinated against COVID 19, with certain exceptions. It did not suspend issuance for those for whose travel is suspended, and travelers will be required to be fully vaccinated and provide proof of that vaccination before boarding a plane to the US. So the reason for this video is we now have additional details about the vaccine requirements, what vaccines are accepted, what documentation, what are the exemptions. So Andrew, to start, what vaccines are accepted for travel into the United States?
So the vaccines that are accepted are the Johnson and Johnson, the Pfizer BioNTech, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Covishield, Sinopharm, Sinovac, and Covaxin.
So, roughly 8 vaccines are currently being accepted for travel into the United States. This list can be updated, but as of now, this is what we have. So, what vaccine records are accepted?
So there are three general types. So the first is verifiable digital or paper records, such as the vaccination certificates or digital passes accessible via QR code, such as the UK NHS COVID Pass and European Union Digital COVID Certificate. The second one is the non-verifiable paper records, such as a paper vaccination record or a COVID-19 vaccination certificate issued by a national or subnational level or by an authorized vaccine provider, such as the CDC vaccination card. And then finally, non-verifiable digital records, such as a digital photo, a vaccination card or record, or a downloaded record or vaccination certificate from an official source or a record shown on a mobile phone or app without the QR code.
So, as an example, people getting vaccinated in the United States get a little card from the CDC. So, obviously, if you had that paper card or a photo on your phone of that paper card, that would be acceptable. But obviously, this varies a little bit from country to country. So, does the proclamation apply to US citizens and residents?
The proclamation does not apply to U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, or those traveling on immigrant visas.
Does the proclamation apply to children?
No, so children under the age of 18 are exempt.
What if vaccine availability is limited in my home country?
So there is an exemption for citizens of a country where less than 10% of the population is vaccinated.
And that is fairly limited in terms of the number of countries that qualify. So, are there humanitarian and emergency exemptions?
Yes, but it's limited to individuals who need to travel to the US for health and safety or are unable to complete the vaccine requirement before doing so. In that case, the individual must contact the nearest embassy or consular post and will transmit the information to the CDC.
Are there national interest exemptions?
Yes. So these individuals will need to show an official U.S. government letter documenting approval of the exemption.
Now, during the ban period, the only way you could get essentially like a visa appointment and then travel to the US from one of the banned areas was to get a national interest exception letter. So there are a lot of people out there who already went through that process and received a national interest exception letter. Can I use that to justify a national interest exemption to not be vaccinated?
So while the Department of State has not issued a formal statement, early reports so far indicate that previously issued NIEs, those national interest exceptions, will no longer be valid for purposes of the vaccination requirements.
And just as an example, we specifically know that the U.S. Embassy in London has come out and said no. The requirements are slightly different. If you think you can qualify under this, you need to make a new national interest exception request. But yet they haven't quite come out and said if it's going to be kind of via the same process. Um, are there any other exemptions from the vaccine requirement?
Yes. So additional exemptions include participants in a COVID-19 clinical trial, individuals for whom the COVID-19 vaccination is medically contradicted, members of the U.S. Armed Forces and their families, as well as diplomats, UN travelers, and sea and airline crew members.
Are there any exemptions for religious reasons or other moral convictions?
So, although these exemptions do exist regarding the vaccine mandates when applying for residency, they do not exist for non immigrant travel to the US.
So let's say someone does qualify for one of the exemptions. Will they be subject to additional requirements after arrival?
Yes, so exempted individuals will be subject to vaccination, testing, and quarantine requirements after they arrive.
And what is the vaccination requirement?
So they must be vaccinated against COVID-19 within 60 days of arriving in the US, with limited exceptions.
What is the testing requirement?
So they have to test 3 to 5 days after arrival unless they can document that they recovered from COVID-19 in the past 90 days.
And what is the quarantine requirement?
So they have to self quarantine for a full 7 days, even if the post arrival test is negative, unless they have recovered from COVID-19 in the past 90 days. They must self isolate if the post arrival test is positive.
Are tests still required to board a plane?
Yes, everyone traveling to the US must produce a negative viral test that's either the NAAT or PCR, taken within 3 days before traveling. For unvaccinated travelers, though, they must produce a negative viral test taken within 1 day before traveling.
Remember, this applies to everybody, including U.S. citizens and residents. And what about children? Do they still have testing requirements?
So, children between the ages of 2 and 17 have to produce a negative viral test.
And then how does this proclamation impact land travel?
So the vaccine requirements apply to all non-essential land travel. Essential land travel is exempted until January of next year, 2022.
And do not have an official date yet. So as of right now, essential travel is exempted via land borders. What is considered essential travel?
As that list includes U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents, individuals traveling for medical purposes, individuals trying to attend educational institutions, those trying to conduct essential work in the United States, traveling for emergency response and public health purposes, lawful cross border trade, those engaged in official government travel or diplomatic travel. And then finally, members of the U.S. Armed Forces and their children and or spouse returning to the United States, and individuals engaged in military related travel or operations.
And so how long will this proclamation last for?
So the proclamation will remain in effect until terminated by the president. The Secretary of Health and Human Services will recommend each month whether the proclamation should be continued, modified, or terminated.
And I don't think it's going to end anytime soon based on what we saw with how long it took them just to lift the ban and move to a vaccine mandate. Um, I would say that this is probably going to be around at a minimum well into next summer. also depending on how COVID-19 goes. So to kind of summarize, as of November 8th, if you want to fly into the United States and you are not a citizen or resident, in general, you must be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. That means if it's a 2-shot regimen, both shots plus 2 weeks, right? There's a list of 8 accepted vaccines that you can choose from. You must provide a record of your vaccination, and it can be a paper record, a picture of that paper record, or, QR code, depending on where you got vaccinated. The vaccination requirements do not apply to U.S. citizens and U.S. residents. They do not also apply to children under the age of 18. There are limited exemptions, but they are extremely limited to countries with under 10% vaccination rates, national interest exceptions, people for whom it's a contradiction. That means medically they can't, like they're like allergic to it or something bad will happen if they take it. And again, for those who do receive exemptions, they will be subject to additional requirements such as getting vaccinated after arrival, quarantines, additional testing. And even for those U.S. citizens who are exempt, if you are not vaccinated, you will have to produce a 1-day test as opposed to a 3-day test. But in general, the important thing to understand is that this is actually a very serious thing. Airlines are not, they're supposed to verify all this information, not allow people to board a plane unless they can prove that they've been fully vaccinated, verify records. And again, these exemptions are extremely limited. So unfortunately, if you need to, if you're going to be traveling to the United States and you're not a U.S. citizen or resident, in all likelihood, you're going to have to be vaccinated in order to travel. I guess the one good thing that we seem to have seen is that because of this mandate, whereas previously a lot of embassies and consulates were just closed, and the only way to even get an appointment was to make a national interest exception argument. We've seen that a lot of embassies have started to reopen, some quicker than others, but the good thing is that visa appointments are now becoming more available. And as of right now, you don't have to prove vaccination in order to get a visa. It's only in order to travel. So the good thing is, we are seeing the consulates and embassies open up a little bit more. There's more visa availability. There's been some countries where they literally just flipped the switch, where it was like nothing to like, oh, back to normal after this happened. But again, you need to check your websites. But thank you for tuning back into this update. Stay tuned for further updates. I hope this was some useful information as we kind of drill down a little bit more into these vaccine requirements so that you can understand what it is. Does your vaccine qualify? What do you need to show? Are there potential exemptions for you? But hey, if you have any questions, comments, please reach out to us so that we can help you navigate this complex immigration system. You can schedule a consultation with our office. Also, download our great app where there's lots of useful information for free. Otherwise, stay tuned and we'll talk to you later.